Welcome to Authentic. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's get started. Oh, I'm so glad to find you today, or that you found me today. I've got something really special that I want to share with you. And actually, honestly, I have been struggling to schedule in my podcast recordings. And this is one of the reasons why I've been invited to speak more and more. And so that is kind of interfering a little bit with my own podcast recording time. But that means I have the opportunity to do something really special. On my most recent teaching or my speech training, I was invited to come speak and teach a group of coaches as part of the coaching or coach mastery community. And it was a group of about 30 some. And while they all couldn't make it, they could all access the recording afterward. And I also was able to get my recording. And so I'm going to piece out two longer sections of training for you and share them within my two next podcast episodes. And this one is really fun. This was essentially my intro, but within my intro, I had a lot of people who were not new to marketing, or maybe had even been coaching for 6 years or longer, and were very successful coaches, very familiar with marketing and copywriting, but they're still struggling with their copywriting and making their message clear what to say. And then some of these coaches were brand new, just certified, and they hadn't even started or learned how to market yet. So what I did was gave them an introduction to the basics of the 101 foundations for marketing, speaking, and copywriting about your offer. And that includes my three frameworks, my three favorite frameworks. And so you get to listen today to that part of the training. And that includes framework number one, which is called Mountain Valley Mountain. And actually, this is the best way to share your story authentically without coming across as pompous or becoming boring. It helps us where we're just too scared to kind of talk about ourselves. We don't want to brag, and we're worrying about how to approach this in a way that creates connections, right? And it's so hard to share our story. We usually want to start at the beginning, but that's not the place to start, actually. That's where we have a tendency to start. The books, sometimes the movies, our basic framework is very linear in our timeline, right? So that shakes that up, and that helps it become human, but also positions you as someone of authority who has a solution that's worth paying for, that's worth listening to. And then the next one, the framework number two, is the absolute basis. And we forget this, or sometimes we do this backward, and it's the hook, story, offer. And that's the pattern. But what happens is we usually come at our approach in speaking about our service or offering with the offer first. And then we'll go into this long story. And then we say the thing that's super exciting, why we're passionate about it, why it's so amazing at the end. So we need to flip that. And I describe that here. And then, of course, story brand. And I've also included the clip of, I'm going through the copy that I wrote. They asked me to write about my speech. What are you teaching us? And so I used the story brand method in telling the story. I used that framework in writing the copy. So you can literally hear how I used the framework to write that as well. So go ahead and listen in on this training. And it was a 2-hour training, but I did spend a lot of time having them go through the work as well. So you're going to have a couple awesome clips coming up in the next 2 episodes. So let's just get to it. So I want to start off with the Teacup Parable, and this might be something that you guys have already heard, but I use this every time I go into learning something new or creating my own content. And the story goes that there's a student who's trying to learn Zen. So he travels all around the Providence, and he goes and he meets with this Zen master. And when he does that, the master invites him to have some tea. So while the master is pouring his own cup of tea, the student starts talking about all the things he's learned with Zen, all his aspirations. And then when the master goes to pour the cup of tea for the student, he fills it to the brim, but then he keeps pouring. All of it just starts overflowing. And the student stops talking, looks to the master and the teacup back and forth, like, what is going on? Finally, as it's pouring across the table, he jumps up and he goes, stop, stop. It's full, no more can go in. So the Zen master stops pouring and says, this is you. Your cup is full. How can I teach you anything about Zen? And I use this to compare how we've already learned a lot of marketing techniques. We've learned tons of different ways to share copy and patterns. And so when we go to learn a new one, we can get really confused and we start mushing them together. So even if you're already familiar with StoryBrand, let's just try to empty the cup for a second, because I have a little bit different way I might approach this than maybe how you've learned it. And I don't want to just make it more confused. But also, when I wrote the intro to what I was going to be teaching today, I mentioned this problem that we have. And it's when we're constantly learning something and we're learning new content. We're listening to podcasts, we're listening to speakers, we're reading books. Sometimes we're taking in so much content that we start to get diluted in our own personal voice, our own personal message. And that really came up for me in my first year of business. And then I had a podcast before the one I had now, and I realized I just started sounding like other people because I'd been hearing other voices in my head so much. Like if I go down to the South, if I spend over a week in Florida, I start talking with a Southern accent. And I don't mean to do it, it just naturally happens. So that's not very authentic to me, and that's not really me. It's just I'm absorbing my environment. So if we empty our cup before we go to create, or when we go to practice writing and speaking, what it is that we do, how we help people, the more we do that, we kind of balance out this absorption of content versus what we have to come and bring to the table. So as a designer, I love to start with one of the biggest problems in creating our websites and our brands. The biggest problem, people are coming to me for beautiful logos and websites, but I know that no matter how beautiful I make their website, that it can still fail, that that's not the problem that needs to be solved. Pretty and professional websites and brands fail every single day, but why? And why is because pretty websites become boring. We just see like the same level of, beautiful design, but without, something that stands out. It gets boring and we can't remember it. We have 10 open tabs because we're shopping for a certain product. They all start looking the same eventually, right? And then overly professional sites. This word is the one that I think 95% of people use when they come to me. I want a professional website. I need a professional brand. But when we're so focused on becoming professional, we don't emotionally connect anymore. We're no longer personal. And I find people saying things like, oh, our customer service department will get to you. And this girl is the customer service department and she's the coach. Don't pretend you have a customer service department. It's even more valuable that you're the one answering my questions. Don't hide that. So what it comes down to really to break this problem is our message. And without having a framework or understanding the psychology and the function of it, just message confusion erupts. We're all over the place. And then again, we could become boring or don't emotionally connect. So one of the first things we need to do at all times is answer the most important question that anyone has that we are speaking to. Maybe it's even like that free consultation call with a client, or it could be on your website, it could be a social media post. The most important question that anyone in your audience has in their mind is, what's in it for me? As a human, our survival instinct is, am I going to spend my most precious resource, my time and my energy on this? Am I going to get something out of it? So we need to answer that for someone. And I think what is really hard for you guys is how to answer that question, because there are about 1,000 things that you do that can be what's in it for them. And even within real estate investing, what we're doing is we're helping someone gain wealth in real estate investing, but what is it that they're going to do with that wealth? Some people are going to do one thing, some people are going to do something completely different. It's all in this aspect of our frame of what's going on in our life. And I hear a lot of marketers breaking it down into 3 different groups. And some marketers say that your business is going to solve one of these 3 problems, but as coaches, you solve all 3. And so we need to communicate that, because as a person coming to a coach, we're either looking for something health related or related to our wealth, growing our wealth, or our love. And not just the romantic love, but our connection, our acceptance, our status, all of that kind of goes in this love aspect. So as a coach, with your coaching, you might help someone be consistent with their workout programs, to be eating healthier. You're going to help them change their mindset for that, right? But then also here's the business aspect, growing wealth. In my business, I need to be a high performer at a certain level in order to grow my business, to be able to increase my rates, to grow my reach. Like there's this personal development I need first. And then of course, love and connection. Faisal says all the time, a lot of people are really struggling with this ability to connect with their families, with their spouses, with their children, coworkers. All of these things are so important. So we just need to communicate what's in it for them in these realms that they're looking for. These are their problems or their desires. But one of the things that happens when we go to copy, especially when we don't have a framework or we are kind of caught off guard, is we end up turning the spotlight on us. And that is the opposite of what we need to do. We need to make sure that the spotlight is on them almost all of the time. So it's not about us, it's about them. Anyone who's familiar with the story brand, again, we're not the hero, right? They are the hero. So talk about them more than you talk about yourself. And I guess why this is so hard is because we're talking about what it is that we're doing. But instead of framing it and say I or we can say you are feeling this, I can help you through this. So it's just a few word switch is really all it takes to take the spotlight off of you, but still communicate the same thing that you want to or need to. And I've actually got 3 different frameworks I want to talk about here, because I feel like these are the foundations to marketing as a whole. And these kind of fit in within the story brand model, but these are also just really simple patterns that I remember when I go to speak about something. The first one I want to talk about is this problem with the spotlight. At some point, we do need to share our own story. So how do we do that? And I like to call this the authentic personal story, because authentic is my new way of spelling authenticity. That's my website, actually. But this is our authentic personal story. And the pattern is mountain, valley, mountain. So when we start off with the mountain, we're starting with the high. If you've watched like a TED Talk or anyone with a speaker, they're being introduced as like all of these successes, as seen on Oprah, helping millions of people, et cetera, et cetera. Like this helps the people with their reticular activation system. They're looking for a solution to their problem. And if we just first start off with like, oh yeah, we had this problem too, or we still have this problem, you're not my solution anymore. So let's start off with the high. Let's use physical fitness for an example. So we might be saying like, I am in the best physical shape of my life. I've lost 60 pounds. Like this is my high. This is where I'm at right now. This builds interest. This builds your credibility. And you're answering their question. They're looking for someone to help them take them to the next level. So then we go into the valley, because if we just stay up on this high, it's like, oh yeah, I was born fit. I was always fit. Well, you can't help me. You haven't solved the problem that I have. So let's then go into the valley. So show your journey, show this empathy. Where did you start? Where did you struggle? Let them know and empathize with them. You've been down there too. Now this makes you personable. This creates trust. So this is a natural way to tell our story, but do it in a way that's interesting and gets someone engaged. But then we got to bring them back up. What is like this solution? What's in it for them? How can you help them? What do you do now? How have you helped others do the same? And then again, this builds your trust and credibility. And they're like, I want to know more. I want what it is which you offer. And this pattern is similar, but not identical to just the foundational sales pitch. So when you're introducing yourself in your site, this is from my podcast. I started off with saying who I am. I'm a speaker, I'm a designer, I'm a Sherpa. I work at home in my own office. If I'm not working, you'll find me on a beach or in the mountains. That's my high, but it wasn't always this way. So if you look at level 2, you'll have some of my backstory here. How I struggled with my authenticity in my business, being a perfectionist, having fear, self-doubt, no classical training. And then 3 is that mountain again. So as an artist and office slave turned brand coach and designer, I was now able to quit my desk job in 5 months, design Google ads for Forbes. I've helped 75 coaches, authors, and speakers become incomparable, on brand with brand consulting and website design. So here's that pattern. Here's an example of that. But this is similar to the foundational sales pitch. So thinking again in a pattern, let's say you're showing up in a Facebook group on a social media post. What is an easy pattern to remember for your offer, or to talk about what it is that you're doing? A lot of people do this backwards. We talk about the offer, then we have the backstory behind it, and then we have like this really intriguing thing that's the hook. But if we flip it, we start off with the hook. We want to catch their attention, speak directly to them and their problem. And you'll notice this a lot. Sometimes it gets overdone. We can add a surprise, a secret, or a contrary belief. But it's got to be authentic and related. This is where I think people get disgusted by marketing and sales messages. They take it to the extreme to try to compete in the chaos. They're out there screaming it and trying to get your attention. So then you do the story. You can tell a story or a lesson within the story. This is again kind of like that valley in the valley mountain. Educate, entertain, and engage them. This positions you again as the guide, someone who can help them and then give them the offer. So this one doesn't have to be your personal backstory, but this is the story of what it is that you offer. And of course, within the offer, you want to tell them what action they need to take as well to do the call to action. So how do we do the story though? The story is one of the hardest parts that I think we get derailed in. And that's why I love Story Brand by Donald Miller. The Story Brand framework is one of the most important things because this is how humans have naturally told stories for like thousands of years. And stories were actually the way we communicated and passed down teachings and lessons and beliefs and religion through story. And so there's a pattern that helps us the most through this. And Donald didn't come up with this. He just wrote it down in a way that we can understand it. And if you learn this, you'll start reading books and watching movies and understand this pattern, and you can start seeing it. You understand who the character is. This is the hero. And they start off the movie and they're usually struggling with something. They're undeveloped. They haven't gone through a transformation and they have a problem. And that's what makes it interesting. So we have a hero, a character, and they have a problem. And in trying to find this problem, they're going to meet a guide. And that is you. When we're talking about our business, we are the guide. If we're pretending to be the hero, look at all this thing that I've accomplished. Someone is going to see us, oh, here's another hero, but this isn't someone that can help me in my journey and my story. We're all the own hero of our own story. So as the guide, the best job of the guide is to help us with a plan. Usually they've learned something or experienced something that we're experiencing now, and they give them a plan. And then the hardest part, I guess, for the character in the story is now that it calls them to action. Because of this plan and this help they've had, they now have to go do something usually pretty hard and scary. Like in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker now has to use his Jedi abilities to try to take down the evil galactic empire, right? But there's got to be something at stake because this character isn't going to do the hard, scary thing. Just like coaches, you guys need to challenge your clients. So as the guide, you've given them the plan. Now you need to challenge them. But when you challenge them, sometimes we don't take action on something because we haven't made clear what is at stake here. And that's where we need to talk about avoiding the failure and the success, the picture of where that's going to go. And when the stakes are high enough, that's going to push me into doing the scary thing that you're challenging me to do. We've got to make those stakes very clear and not just assume that someone's going to know or understand or even spend the time figuring that out for themselves, essentially. So what you can do, like on your website, in your email, on your sales page, in your social media post, you can just go through this storyline. It works for almost anything you've ever written, but it works exceptionally well for websites. So this is the one I really focus on. And it might not be in this exact pattern. And we're going to get to that next, but this is just the absolute foundation for what I keep in mind when I have 30 some pages of content and I need to make it into a website. I'll just come back here and be like, okay, who is it that we're serving? Let's start from the basics, essentially. So the character that I wrote was you guys, us, as entrepreneurs and coaches. We're always on the search for what to learn to become better, to do better, to be better. And then we have a problem, right? A side effect of us learning more is we're being taught other people's way of doing things. We're being taught that we need to conform and compete to succeed. And this has a side effect causing you to say and do things that confuse your message and may not be authentic. I talked about this in the beginning with the cup parable. When we have so much inside of us, we just start regurgitating other people's stuff. It's hard to get in touch with our own message. So meets a guide. I didn't go crazy like positioning myself as the guide. I didn't need to. I just used this kind of mountain valley mountain thing. Just say, I know I was stuck in the vortex of being disfigured and derailed by the how-to for years. And positioning me as a guide, many of my clients are stuck deep when they hire me. So I help other people through this. I only needed these two things to position myself as the guide. I didn't need my whole backstory. I didn't need my credentials. I just needed these two statements here. And then the next one is with a plan. So I'm, again, doing a little bit more of this guidance positioning, but showing my experience. After 1,000 website pages and ads later, I know copywriting is one of the hardest parts. The secret to success is not in being better, it's in being different. You were born different and you think different. Like, this is the plan, to stop trying to compete by being better and be different instead. And then my call to action is, you were born different, you think different, it's your advantage, use it. I'm calling you to action to use what makes you different instead. And then avoiding failure. So here's what's at stake. If we don't do this, we're going to continue feeling disconnected from what we do when it comes time to speak and write about it. And if we continue this, we're going to feel like we have to be something we're not to continue to market our business. And I think that's the number one reasons for burnout when I've seen entrepreneurs, is they just keep feeling like they have to do these things that isn't really aligned with them. Success. Clarify your message and communicate with ease to make better connections, get more commitments and clients. It's essentially what people want when they come to me. Like, I need more clients, I need more conversions, I want to increase my rates. So that is the success. And then I always want to add a final CTA. We need to help guide them. Like, what do we do next? So join me on Thursday, July 29th, whatever today is, and becoming comparable. All right. So that was part one of part two, and that was the beginning of my training essentially. So while these are sometimes very simple, or we've already heard this before, it's really hard to practice these, or we forget to even practice these. And we usually end up skipping around or skipping the framework completely. So I hope this has helped either remind you or let you know, whatever it is that you're learning with marketing and copywriting, like, this is where you start and end. There's a lot of other things that can be kind of like the meat and the juicy stuff in the middle, but it almost doesn't matter what other things you inject, as long as you're nailing this framework. Like, that's it. That's the key. People really, while it also might seem complicated, while sometimes it seems simple, people do even more so overcomplicate this. So I hope this helped. Go ahead and practice this through on the messages of your website, in your next social media posts, in your next podcast, or if you're ever speaking to someone, a friend, a relative, someone in the line at Starbucks about your service and what it is that you do. Go ahead and practice these frameworks, write them out beforehand. Have a long and a short version. I found is really helpful, because sometimes we have the opportunity to introduce a little bit more to this story and add some more of our own details. But whatever you make, whether it's a minute or even 3 minutes, get it down to like a minute and then 30 seconds, and then see if you can get like a 15 to 30 second version of each of these as well. But sometimes we need that additional content and story in between. These work for emails, social media posts, your website content, anytime that you're asked what it is that you do. What do you offer? So if you feel like you need a little bit of additional help, over at authentic.com/blog, you can watch the video and actually see the slides, and you can see me talking. Sometimes that's helpful for the examples that I've given. When we're hearing the words, sometimes they go in one ear, out the other. So the slides are so helpful. You can watch this, the clip of this video over at authentic.com/blog. And definitely stay tuned, because next week is the Second part of this training, where we finite this down and get the core message written and the most important pieces of that story brand method or model there. That framework has 7 pieces, but essentially with only 4 of those pieces, you can communicate the entire story in even more powerful of a message as well. So I teach you that next week. Please stay tuned and come back. And the video of that one as well will also be over at authentic.com/blog. And if you're still struggling with this, this is one of the 3 steps of my client process that you can access for free. If you go to authentic.com, you can sign up for those and you will be given access to those when they are available. So the second step of my client process is essentially creating these stories and using these frameworks in all areas and aspects of our business. So thank you so much for joining me today. It was so fun to do the training, but it's even more fun to share it with you here. Double duty for my work essentially, but it's just so good. I didn't need to record it. Like I worked very, very hard on finding a way to communicate and teach this in the least amount of time possible and really put to words what these frameworks are that I use for writing my clients' website content. I use these all the time over and over, a combination of both or just one or all 3. Essentially, they can really flow together. So when you understand all 3, you'll start actually seeing people do this and you'll start recognizing it for yourself. And it's really fun to do, to break someone, their pattern apart or their marketing apart and say, what part of this is the hook? What part is the story? This is their mountain. This is their valley. Here's their second mountain. It's really fun. So when you start identifying those, it helps you also curate your own even more profoundly. So thanks for joining me again, and I can't wait to see you next week. In the meantime, take care. My name is Monica Fawn. I'm an artist and marketing assistant turned brand Sherpa and website designer. I help people just like you and me be on fire and sustainably profitable, to be on brand, incomparable in your industry with a personal brand, and on purpose, walking your path of fulfillment. And last and not least, be authentic, living a life true to yourself and free.